Hello, and welcome to another Wednesday live stream. Now, if you are a regular viewer of these English live streams that improve your English, you may be thinking, hang on, Craig, has Lynn grown a beard and now wearing glasses? No, I have a very special guest joining me today, and we're going to talk about 16 useful English phrases that will help you improve your English. And I'm delighted to welcome Daniel from My Fluent Podcast. Hi, Daniel.
Hello, Craig. Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yes, it's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to this because Daniel has a website over at My Fluent Podcast. He has two podcasts. Well, why don't you explain what they are? Because people who don't know you have no idea what your podcast is about and what your second podcast is about.
Sure. Thank you. So, my first podcast is called My Fluent Podcast because basically I started out to become a better English speaker and to talk about my passion, which is language learning. And my second podcast is called The Vocab Man, in which I explain different expressions. So basically, whenever I come across a great expression, I try to learn it by producing an episode, and at the same time, I can teach it to others. So it's a win-win situation.
Yes, and Daniel and I did a podcast together recently, a crossover podcast. We did one podcast and shared it on both our podcast feeds. So if you want to listen, you can go to My Fluent Podcast and listen to us on Daniel's site, or you can go to English Podcast and listen to it on there. And while we're waiting for people to come in and join us, obviously you're watching the replay if you're not yet with us live. And if this is your first time, my name's Craig from EnglishPodcast.com and also from MansionEngles.com, where you can learn English for free, especially if you're a Spanish speaker. And if you're interested in conversation courses, then EnglishMasterclass.net is where I suggest you go to sign up for the newsletter, and I will let you know when our next conversation class is starting. But while we're waiting a few minutes for more people to come in before we start, just let me quickly share my screen and show you Daniel's website and his podcast. So My Fluent Podcast is where you can listen to Daniel's episodes on fluency. And as he said, he speaks to other language learners about how they're improving their language learning skills. And also here you can find the Vocab Man podcast on the same website. And this really is what inspired me to introduce you to Daniel today, because he's got a long list of expressions and phrasal verbs and common English expressions that you don't normally learn in course books. And I think that's going to be really useful for you.
Thank you very
So,
much, Craig.
hi, Gemma. You're the first in, as usual. Lovely to have you with us. Like to introduce you to Daniel, and hopefully more people will be joining us soon. So, shall we get started with the first expression?
Let's
Who's
get
going
cracking.
first? Let's get cracking. Let's get the ball rolling. So we've got 16 expressions for you. And they're a mixture, aren't they, Daniel? Some of them are phrasal verbs. There's, I think, some idioms in the list as well.
Definitely.
Okay, so here we go. Now, this is my first expression is a slow coach. Well, a slow coach in British English. And that's something my wife often calls me when we're walking along the street, because I walk very slowly. And my wife walks as if she is training for an Olympic marathon. And it's very difficult for me to keep up with her. So she might turn around and say, "Come on, slow coach, walk faster." Now, in US English, you might hear slowpoke, which has the same meaning. And it's just a person who does things slowly, and I tend to do things slowly. Are you a slow coach, Daniel, or are you very fast when you
No, I am
do
very
things?
fast when it comes to walking, but I am a slow thinker actually.
That's a good thing, I think. So you don't jump to make decisions.
Yes, exactly. And I also don't like to be on the spot actually.
Like you are now, for example.
Yes. But for
Yeah.
me it's I try to go the extra mile, right?
Yeah. We have to go the extra mile. We have to make an effort and go outside our comfort zone. So yeah, a slow coach is somebody that does things slowly, and it takes me a long time to get ready before I leave the house, before I go out. So I often hear from the other side of the flat, "Hey, come on, slow coach, we're going to be late. You're such a slow coach." So that's an unusual expression that you might find useful. If you see any or hear any expressions that you like that you didn't know before, make sure you write them down, make a note, and as Daniel often says in his podcast, incorporate them into your vocabulary. Use them as often, as frequently as you can, not only in your spoken English, but in your written English as well. Okay, next one. Over to you, Daniel.
So you don't say. So it's really a great expression in my opinion, because it can have different meanings depending on how you pronounce it or depending on the situation. So for me, it's a very versatile idiom which you can use, and oftentimes in movies you can see it, and it cracks me up, because also I don't know if you might have seen this. There is a meme of Nicolas Cage which was very well known, and for me it's perfect when he has an expression in his face, this typical expression from a movie, and then it says "you don't say," and it exactly explains the meaning of this idiom, or one of the meanings, because as I said, there are several meanings. And yeah, but I think it's difficult to use, because it always depends on the situation. And I don't know, Craig, do you use it sometimes?
Yeah, it's used often in a sarcastic way, isn't it? When you want to be ironic or sarcastic. For
Yes.
for example, you have somebody who drinks a lot, who smokes a lot, who does no exercise. This person is very, very overweight, and suddenly you say that, yeah, he died of a heart attack. And you
Yeah.
don't say, because obviously, if you're going to abuse your body and not take care of yourself in that way, it's no surprise that you're going to maybe die early. So if you don't look after yourself, then yeah, it's obvious. So it's kind of like, oh, really? You don't say so? It's a very
Yeah.
sarcastic way of exclaiming something.
And I like mainly this part of using the idiom, the sarcastic part. But of course, you can also use it by just saying you don't say, to indicate that you didn't know. You can just show that you didn't know it, right? You know
Oh,
what I
like
mean?
yeah, like you're. Oh,
Like
really? You don't
like
say?
yeah,
Is that
exactly.
is that true?
And I
Yeah.
don't know, maybe you know the series Mandalorian. It's a
Yes, I
Star Wars
love I
series.
love the
And
Mandalorian. Yeah.
and they use a similar expression. They say, "Is that so? Is that
Is that
so?
is that so?
Is that so?"
Yeah.
Maybe now that you have heard it, you have to be more aware of it. They always say, "Is that so?" And it reminded me of the similar expression "you don't say," and I really like it.
So if I said to you that I took a Spanish exam and I scored 190 out of 190 for the exam, you might say,
You don't say, because I already expected it. So because it's normal for you, of course, because you are the king of English, right? So
but
there
not,
is
but
no
not,
other way.
but not the king of Spanish. If you knew me better, then you wouldn't say, yeah, you wouldn't say that if you knew how my Spanish was. It's terrible.
I don't
But
believe you.
it's true. It's true. Another example might be a person who's working, but they constantly arrive late for work. They're always phoning in sick with excuses. They work really badly. They fall asleep at the desk, and suddenly you hear that this person lost their job. Oh, really? You don't say. So that's another
Mhm.
that's another sarcastic use of the word. Or you, as Daniel said, you just use it as a surprise. Oh, you don't say, really? That's news. I didn't know that. Yeah. Okay, going back to slow coach, if somebody is a slow coach and they do take a long time to do things, one thing you could say to them is get a move on, or hurry up is very similar. Get a move on. Come on, slow coach, get a move on. Do things faster. Get a move on, Craig. We'll be late. That kind of thing. Have you heard that one, Daniel? Get a move on?
Yes, I have heard it, but I have never used it. But I know a similar expression which goes like this: cut to the chase. But I'm not sure if it is used often. I don't know. Cut to
It's
the chase.
it's
Or
common.
don't beat around the bush also.
It's common. Both of those are common. They are used often, but not quite in the same way. Get a move on just means move quickly, hurry up, do things
Yeah.
faster. But cut to the chase, beat around the bush means go directly to the point of what you're saying. Speak straight to me. Don't try to say things that are going away from the point you want to make. Speak directly, be honest with me. So it's not exactly the same. Eduardo, hi. Good to see you here. What do you mean by this is the way? Is that a similar expression to something?
Yes, it's also from Mandalorian and Boba
Ah,
Fett,
yes, yes,
and
yes.
they are always saying it. Is that the way? It's also awesome. I just
Okay.
love it.
So Eduardo is a fan. I must watch that again because I watched it when it first was released. I enjoyed it very much, but that was a couple of years ago, I think. So I need to watch it again.
And there is another series called Boba Fett. It's similar to The Mandalorian. So you need to catch up on this as well.
I will. I'm sure Eduardo has seen it. Um, yeah, well, I know you felt alone, but Sandra's here as well with you. So, hi, Sandra. Where are you from, Sandra? Are you based in Europe or where are you at the moment? Let us know. Moving on. What's the next one? It's yours.
It's to go the extra mile, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, to do more than one is required to do. So, for example, this could be this. Let me see on my notes where I have it. So, for example, I was supposed to read one chapter, but I went the extra mile and read the whole book. So it's like you go above and beyond, right? You overperform. You do more than maybe others did. So I really like it because sometimes, well, in my opinion, sometimes we just need to go the extra mile if we want to reach our goals. And sometimes it's really worthwhile to do it. And And that's why I really love it. And I think that I have heard it several times on your podcast, Greg.
I don't remember specifically using that, but yeah, it's possible. But I would use that expression for your podcast because when I create a podcast, and thank you, Sandra, for your kind words about the podcast. When I create a podcast, I just edit it and publish it with maybe a little bit of music sometimes. But Daniel really goes the extra mile with his podcast because you edit a lot more with a lot more imagination and a lot more creativity. So Daniel does
Thank you.
more. He puts more love in his podcast. So he does go the extra mile, makes an extra effort.
Yeah, especially for the vocab man, because I try to integrate small audio snippets so that I can give examples of an expression. And so for me, it's like a hobby because I enjoy it. And yeah, it's a win-win, as I said in the beginning. I hope so. It's a win-win.
Definitely. So, Sandra, Eduardo, Gemma, when you're reading these expressions, please write an example sentence in the comments, and we'd like to see you using these expressions, and we'll help you with any suggestions that we can. So, use these expressions, write them in the chat, and give us some examples. My next one is to be on the fence about something. Now, if you've seen films or TV series, or even been in person to the UK and seen gardens in England, houses with gardens, there's very often wood dividing the gardens from one neighbor to another, and that barrier, that it's often wood, could be plastic, but it's called a fence, and it divides things. So if you imagine somebody sitting on the fence about a topic or a subject or an opinion, then they're not sure if they're going to go one way or the other. They're hesitating. They're on the fence. So we can use this expression idiomatically when we're not sure what to do about something. We're undecided or maybe neutral. For example, there's an election, a general election. We have to vote soon, and I'm still on the fence about which political party to vote for in the next election. Or another example, I want to travel abroad, but it's very difficult traveling at the moment. There are cancellations. There are lots of problems with airline companies. So I'm on the fence about traveling abroad. I'm not sure if I want to go. Daniel, is there anything that you're on the fence about at the moment? Maybe you're thinking about buying something new or spending money on something, but you're not sure if you want to go ahead.
Yes, I am always on the fence about something because it's just like how I am. So, for instance, right now I'm thinking of making a new project of mine, like a podcast project.
A
But
third podcast.
yes, or like
Wow.
for a new episode. So that's the problem with me, right? Because I got carried away. But yeah. So is it also similar to being hesitant, right? Because you haven't decided yet.
Yes, to be undecided, to be thinking about something. For example, I have a computer here and it's working fine, but it's very old now, and I'm very anxious. Maybe it's going to break down, something's going to happen, and I need a new computer. But I'm on the fence. I don't know if I should spend the money now or wait until it breaks, for example. Or my website where Ingles Podcast is, it's very old, the software isn't being updated, and I need to change it to a different software. And I'm on the fence because it's a lot of work, and at the moment it seems to be working. So I'm debating with myself whether to make a decision. I'm on the fence. I'm not sure. Gemma, are you on the fence about anything? Eduardo, are you on the fence? Sandra? What are you on the fence about at the moment? What are you considering doing? So while you're thinking about that, let's go to the next one.
Yeah. So another very practical expression. I lost my train of thought.
You like this one, don't you? You use it often.
Yes, I use it often because it happens a lot to me when I am interviewing people, right? And then all of a sudden, my mind goes blank. I don't know where I was. And then I can say, sorry, I lost my train of thought. Because I don't know what I wanted to say, or I lost, the idea that I had beforehand. Then you can just say, I lost my train of thought, right? And also, it buys me a little bit of time. And instead of using crutch words or just being hesitant, I can say, I lost my train of thought. And I like these type of expressions because they are helping me actually.
Also, it's quite a long expression, isn't it? It's like 6 words, so you can say it slowly, and while you're saying it, that gives you time to think.
Yes, yeah, and I think it's better to say I lost my train of thought and thinking about it again instead of just bubbling something, right?
I lose my train of thought more and more as now I'm getting older, but I like to use this expression as well, and I'm writing it in the chat. I'm having a senior moment. If you have a senior moment, that's when you get older and your memory starts going, it starts disappearing, and you often lose your train of thought. You open the refrigerator, and what am I looking for? Or you go into another room and you don't remember why you're in the room. That happens. I lose my train of thought. And Eduardo has a nice expression here as well. After you're on the fence, you need to take the plunge. Eduardo, do you want to come in and join us and explain what take the plunge means? And we'll wait for you to come in and explain that before we tell you what it means. And just let me put the link here. If you want to join us live, you'll be very, very welcome to come and say hello. So the address you need in your browser is this, and I'll also put this in the chat so you can come and say hi. And Hema, if you're interested to say hello and come in and chat, it's nice and quiet this evening. There aren't many people watching, so why don't you take the plunge and don't sit on the fence, don't be on the fence, come and say hi and have a chat with us. So there's the link as well in the chat on YouTube and on Facebook. And sometimes tend to lose. You need the infinitive of the verb there, Gemma. So to lose my train of thought with some words. Yeah, me too. I think, especially names. If I'm speaking about a film or a TV series, I used to have the names immediately in my brain, and now I really have to think of people's names. It's annoying. And Maria, hi Maria Clara. She's on the fence about choosing a job offer, this job offer or the other one. Yeah, that's a good sentence. I would say after choosing one job offer or the other one. Or which job offer to choose, you could say. I'm on the fence about which job offer to choose. Is that true, Maria? Or is that just an example sentence? Are you in between jobs at the moment? Are you on the fence? Okay. Well, I've lost my train of thought. Where were we?
Well, let's go to the next expression.
Oh, yes, I ended up. Yeah. This is another expression that you don't often find in English courses and course books. I ended up. And it's usually, although not always, followed by a verb in the ing form, a gerund. So, for example, I went to a party, I drove my car, I drank too many beers and too much whiskey, and I ended up going home by taxi. So I need the verb there with the ing, and it means to finish what happened at the end, and usually with a surprising or unusual result. To do something, to be in a situation that was not planned or expected. For example, last weekend I wanted to go out Friday night, Saturday night, go to a club, meet some friends, but I was so tired. I had such a hard week at work that I ended up staying home.
I have another example for you, Craig.
Go for it.
Even though I am an introvert and I don't like being on the spot, I ended up in a live session with Craig.
And you ended up starting a podcast.
Yes.
Remember to use that gerund with the verb. So starting. I ended up starting. You know, I've told you many times on this stream that if you have a preposition and you use a verb, the verb is always ing. So ended up is a preposition, ing. That's okay, Hema. Yeah, I know your keyboard. Hema ended up buying a new keyboard because her keyboard wasn't working. And Maria says, yeah, it was an example. Okay, you're welcome. Now, here's a question for you, Daniel. How many languages do you think you will end up speaking fluently?
That is a difficult question. Because, I have many years, hopefully, still to learn languages. But I can tell you that I can speak German, Swiss German, Spanish, French, English. I might have forgotten one, but that's about it.
How's your Italian?
My Italian is not so good when it comes to speaking, but I can understand a lot.
Yeah.
Yes.
So your receptive Italian is very good.
Yes, I would say so. And I am now on my 4th lesson, online lesson with a teacher. And my goal there is just to speak, right? So I am embarrassing myself a little bit, but it's okay.
So you are actively learning Italian as well?
Yes. I am sbagliando, sono imparando. That was wrong, but it means something like by making mistakes, I can learn or something like that.
No, it's interesting, that point, because I know you're interested in the way people learn languages. I have two friends who have recently moved from the USA to Spain, and they are both English speakers. One is British and her husband is American, and they have completely different approaches to learning Spanish. Now that they're living here permanently, they need to learn the language, and the guy is studying grammar and he's doing organized language courses, and the woman is only learning by listening to the language and repeating what she hears and using her personality when she's out in. Luckily, they're living in the country where the language is spoken, but she's very auditive. She relies on hearing the language and repeating the music of it and the words and phrases. It's very interesting. The guy is very analytical and likes the structure, and she is a more creative and likes the sounds. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, actually, if I might add something, in my case, I would say that 99% of how I learned English was through listening to podcasts, I would say.
Wow. Yeah. Are you listening to podcasts in other languages, in Italian, for example, and Spanish? Yeah,
I began listening to Italian podcasts and YouTube channels, but it's difficult. But Nevertheless, I would say that I understand 70%. Well, depending on the content, of course. But
Yeah.
a lot of content on YouTube, for example, they are using very basic vocabulary words. So I can understand maybe 80% or so
Right.
or more.
Yeah, that's impressive. So I think you will end up speaking maybe a dozen languages. I think it's fantastic.
That would be great.
Okay, your turn.
Next up is Can I pick your brain? And this is
Sounds
really an awesome idiom. When I came across this idiom, it was actually in a conversation with someone from the UK, and he really wanted to ask me how to put up or how to create a YouTube channel, because this person thought that I was very knowledgeable in the YouTube topics and so on. So he wanted me to explain him how he has to proceed, how he has to go about it. So it's a really great expression if you want to get advice from someone who has knowledgeable knowledge in a specific area, I would say. And it's just the way how it sounds, and also the verb pick. It's really funny that it's used in this context. I really
Yeah,
had to smile when I heard it.
maybe we should explain pick if people are not sure what it means. The verb to pick, you can pick fruit, for example. So you can pick an apple from a tree, and you can pick your nose, which is really disgusting. So to pick your brain
Yeah.
is to take out particular information from somebody's brain and use it to your advantage. So to really ask advice. And I'd like to add that in my experience, when you ask somebody for their advice and you say, "Can I pick your brain on this because I know you know a lot about it," or "I really need your advice on this topic," you're paying a huge compliment to people. And generally speaking, people love to share their knowledge and share what they know. And it's a nice thing to do if you need somebody's advice to say, "Can I pick your brain on this? I really don't know how to do it." Okay, so come on, guys. Gemma, Sandra, Eduardo, Maria. I know there are more people watching and you haven't said hello. Let us know where you're from. If you haven't already, introduce yourself and write examples for these expressions. Can you use "Can I pick your brain" in a sentence? Can you use "I ended up" with an example that's true for you? We'd love to get your feedback on that. Your guess is as good as mine. So we have 3 or 4 people who have said hello in the chat, but we have 9 people watching at the moment. So who are the other 5 people? Your guess is as good as mine. We don't know. Neither of us know. So if you don't know something, if you have no idea, then you can use that expression, which is quite common. Daniel, how do you say live stream in Japanese?
Oh, your guess is as good as mine.
No idea. Yeah. I
Or
don't know either.
I have no clue.
How many people do you think will eventually watch this live stream?
Your guess is as good as mine. I have no
Exactly.
clue.
Your guess is as good as mine. Hi, Ninette. Thank you for joining. You can only see Eduardo in the chat. Yeah, some people are watching on YouTube, Gemma. So Maria, for example, is watching on YouTube because this is going live to both platforms, Facebook and YouTube. So there are more people watching. And now we're in double figures. So there are 11. How many people will be watching? Your guess is as good as mine. We have no idea. Okay, let's go to the next one.
So the next one is Don't Get Me Wrong. And I think it's self-explanatory, right? So actually, maybe you are aware of a delicate topic, and you don't want that the other person is misunderstanding you. So you can just say, "Don't get me wrong" in the beginning, and then tackle the delicate topic maybe. So it's like giving a heads up to the other person, or like to say, yeah, don't get me wrong. Maybe this person is not gonna like it, or there is the possibility that the person is not gonna understand me 100%. So it's like, yeah, it's like a way to give a heads up, to say, attention, I'm gonna say something which might be problematic. Yeah.
It's also used as a precursor, which means it's often used before you say something to prepare the person for what you're going to
Yeah.
say. Yeah. For example, if a student says to me, Craig, what do you think about my English? I might say, well, don't get me wrong. I think your English is very good. However, and then you give them some maybe ways to improve. So it's a way to soften the information and prepare
Yes.
them for what you're going to say.
Or another example would be, um, Nicole, don't get me wrong, but 8 dogs are just too many dogs for me. Why not try first with 1 dog?
Yeah. Hi, Norma. Thank you for joining. And who else is with us? Alberto from Brussels. Good to have you with us as well, Alberto. So what we're doing, if you've just joined us, we're introducing some useful expressions, and we would really appreciate it if you would write some examples in the chat so that we can see that you are following and you're using these in a sentence. So don't get me wrong. How can you use that in a sentence? Don't get me wrong. We love that you're watching, but we would like you to write something in the chat and practice your English at the same time. Okay, to make matters worse. Now, you might have heard the word matter. Oh, before I do that, let me go back to Daniel's, because there was one thing I wrote in the chat I want to explain. Daniel used this expression a couple of times that you may not know, to give a heads up, when your head is up. So that's another idiomatic expression. If you give someone a heads up, you give them advanced warning about something, or you give them new information. Let me give you a heads up about Daniel's wonderful podcast, or let me give you a heads up about what we're going to discuss next week. So you're giving information that maybe people don't know. We do have a sentence for Maria. Are you wearing that? Don't get me wrong, but it's a really formal occasion. Yeah, nice example. Yeah. Are you seriously wearing those clothes? Don't get me wrong, but it's not very suitable for a funeral. Yeah, exactly. And an example from Alberto. Don't get me wrong. If you say hello and I take a ride. What do you think about that one, Daniel? You mean I take a ride, I just go, I leave you?
I would say
And
so.
yeah, so maybe I take off would be a better expression. Use the phrasal verb to take off, which is to leave quickly. Yeah, don't get me wrong. If you say hello and I take off, I have a meeting in half an hour, for example. So don't misunderstand me. Yeah. And I was thinking the same thing, Alberto. Don't get me wrong. The wonderful song by the Pretenders, which Daniel might not know because you're younger than me. Do you remember that song? Chrissy Hynde from the Pretenders, Don't Get Me Wrong?
It rings a bell, but I have to re-listen to it.
Okay, I'll try to find it later and put it in the chat. Yeah, it's a song. I'll put a link from YouTube in the chat when I get a chance. How many of these idioms and expressions do native speakers? A lot. They are common expressions, Eduardo, which is why we chose them. And one of the reasons Daniel's with me today, apart from the fact I like talking to him, is a really nice guy, but he also is very, very good at noticing these expressions in English and capturing them and learning them and using them. So it's a wonderful way to expand your vocabulary when you interact with English people, when you watch TV, when you listen to podcasts, when you watch YouTube, and you hear an expression, find out what it means, notice it, focus on it, record it. I mean, write it down or record it on your phone, and then learn it and use it. And Daniel does that very well.
Yeah, I think there are many useful expressions which maybe are not so fantastic, or like the thing is, or there you go, or there you have it. These are little expressions, but which are used very often by native speakers, and I think we can guess what they mean, but we cannot produce them by ourselves, because usually in grammar books they are not used.
Yeah, I'm sorry for the silence. I was looking for Don't Get Me Wrong on YouTube, so I'm trying to find one with the lyrics. There's lots of them here. Hi, Nathalie. Good to have you here. And yeah, it rings a bell, which was an expression that Daniel just used. So well done, Maria Clara. That's exactly what we're talking about. You noticed Daniel using that expression. Maybe you knew it, maybe you'd heard it before, but if you like it, you need to use it regularly in conversation or in writing, and that's how it sticks in your mind and you expand your vocabulary. Yeah.
Yeah, but we need to explain it, right, Craig? It rings a bell. Did we explain it yet?
Yeah, did we? No, you take it. You explain it while I'm looking for the pretenders.
So, it rings a bell means that in this context, I couldn't put a finger on it. I couldn't make out what it means, but I think in my brain, in some parts of my brain, it reminds me of something. It reminds me of something, but I can't really tell you what exactly. I don't know if I explained it correctly. It rings a bell. It's just, it reminds me of something, but I'm not completely sure if I'm wrong or, yeah.
Thank you, Alberto. I think you beat me to it. You beat me to it with your link for the pretenders. Yeah, and we found the same video. Yeah, exactly. No, you explained it very well, Daniel. For example, you might say you recognize somebody's face, but you don't know who they are. So you say, yeah, I've seen that person before. His face rings a bell, but I'm not sure what his name is. So you recognize something, but you're not exactly sure what it is or where it's from. Yeah. Okay, moving on. We were here to make matters worse. You may have heard matter before. It doesn't matter, or what's the matter, what's wrong. But if you make matters worse or make things worse, then you make a situation that's already bad more unpleasant or more difficult. For example, I was really sad last week when my girlfriend broke up with me, and to make matters worse, she did it by text message. So the situation was really tragic and really bad. And then on top of that, you can also say, on top of that, or to make it worse, she sent me a message. How cold. It was horrible. Another example, this is a joke actually, I tried to apologize to my boss, by buying her some chocolates and some flowers. I didn't know she was a diabetic and she had hay fever, and I made matters worse. So yeah, you do something that makes the situation more unpleasant and worse than it already is. So can you think of a sentence that uses that expression, to make matters worse? Let us know and write it in the chat. Yep, you know that song. That's good. It is a great song, yeah, from the 80s. Chrissy Hind as a lead singer, I remember. Okay, over to you, Daniel.
Okay, next up is if you will. And yeah, this will be very difficult to explain, but actually it's when you are in a discussion and maybe you are using an expression or a term which probably might not be the correct term, or let's say another person would call it another way or would say it in another way. So you can just insert, if you will, to indicate that maybe what you are saying is not seen as correct by others. But this is difficult to explain it. I should have prepared better.
Do you have an example? Do you have an example?
No. Unfortunately not.
Okay, what about this? So what the government gives you or what the government tells you is not exactly your rights. It provides a wall, if you will, a security so that you can exercise that which you already possess by being human. So it's using the idea of a wall, if you will, as an example to help you understand the sentence. There's something else you can use in a similar way, and that's let's say. So, for example, imagine an alien comes to Earth and says, Craig, what is the internet? How do you explain the internet? Well, it's like a way of communication, if you will, or it's a way of people speaking to each other who live a long distance from where you are, let's say. So you're giving an example, you're trying to figuratively explain something, and you can use let's say or if you will as you're giving the example. I don't know if that's clear or not.
Yeah, and also I noticed
it's hard to understand.
I noticed that even some native speakers are saying instead of let's say, they just say. They are using just the word say. And to me, it was really strange. And then I re-listened to it and re-listened. And then I came to the conclusion that yes, sometimes they use it just by saying say.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. Yeah. There are a couple of, I'm trying to think of their names, a couple of politicians who use that a lot. When they're giving examples, they're saying, let's say, or if you will. If you will, I think is maybe a little more formal, but it means the similar thing. You use it in a similar way. Let me try and think of another example and make this clearer.
Yeah, you could also say, instead of if you will, you could say, if you will allow this analogy, right? And then you explain.
Yes, good. Exactly. Yeah, my mum said to me one day, because she died unfortunately a few years ago, and she knew I was doing podcasts, and one day she said, Craig, what's a podcast? Well, how do you explain to a lady who's 90 years old who does not use the internet what a podcast is? And I said, well, Mum, it's like a radio show, if you will, for the internet. And she understood what radio is, and she kind of knew what the internet was, so she understood the analogy. So it's exactly what it is. It's an analogy of something, let's say. if you will. Yeah, explaining that was easier said than done, wasn't it? So easier said than done is my next. Not as easy as it seems. For example, making money and becoming rich on the internet is easier said than done. Getting 1 million views on on a YouTube video is easier said than done. Learning to speak a new language
Yes.
is maybe easy. Were you thinking the same way?
Yeah. Becoming fluent in 1 month. Because sometimes there are these YouTube videos in which they can become fluent in 1 month or so, and it's easier said than done. Yes.
Running a marathon is easier said than done. And if you think about learning a language, it's more of a marathon than a sprint, let's say. What does Maria say? This book is about two people who fight to get together, if you will.
Yes.
Well, yes, but if that is exactly what the book is about, you don't need to say if you will.
Yeah, we need to have more information about the book to say if it's correct or not.
Yeah, and also, as Daniel said, the idea of an analogy, comparing it to something that's similar, is important, because if it's actually exactly what the book is, you wouldn't use if you will. You just say this book is about two people who fight to get together. That's a summary of the book. Okay. To nail something. A nail is something that you use to hit into wood, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. But in this idiom, you want to say that you were extremely successful. So you really nailed it, right? Tack, with one push, and you nailed it. So you want to say that, yeah, you were successful. So, for example, David nailed the FCE exam. He scored 190 out of 190 points. So he really nailed it.
And I think you've really nailed that definition. Perfect. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. You really nailed it. Well, I think it's time to wrap up this live stream, almost. So wrap, and notice the W there. We're not speaking about music here, not rap music, but to wrap something. If you have a birthday present or a Christmas present, you often cover it with paper, with colored paper. And this phrasal verb, to wrap up, is to put the paper around the present, if you will. So
Yes.
this phrasal verb can also be used idiomatically when you want to finish something. Imagine you're in a business meeting and it's time to go to the pub. You say, okay, guys and girls, thanks for coming. It's time to wrap up the meeting, or let's wrap this meeting up. So this is one of the phrasal verbs that you can separate. You can put the object in the middle, and you can put a pronoun in the middle. Let's wrap it up, or let's wrap this up. So let's wrap up the live stream. But before we finish, before we wrap it up, I think you've got one more.
Yeah, to roll with it is to adapt to a situation despite unexpected circumstances or challenges. Because as it happens in life, sometimes it doesn't happen the way you like it, and then it's better to just roll with it. Maybe let's say the microphone of Greg is broken. Then I could just roll with it, and then I could take over the live stream and speak instead of Craig. I would just roll with it, right?
Yeah. Another expression I like that's very similar is to go with the flow as well. Have you heard that one? To go
Yes,
with
I
the
like that
flow, to
quite a
go with a
bit.
situation. It's nice because go and flow have the same vowel sound, so it works well together. Yeah, I like to go with the flow. Let's go with the flow. Let's see what happens. Let's be do things off the cuff, so to speak, as as you will.
Another
Um,
great expression, off the cuff. I love
yes.
that.
Shall we?
Without preparation.
Yeah, let me put that in the chat while you're explaining it. Can you give an example of off the cuff?
Yes, I mean, you could practice your English by picking a topic and then off the cuff speaking about this topic. So without preparing anything, just what comes to mind off the off the cuff. Sorry.
Off the puff is something else. That's something else.
Maybe it helps also.
Helps me sleep. Helps me sleep. Yeah. Okay. Eduardo says, "Let's call it a day." I agree, Eduardo. It's 9 o'clock here in Spain, and it's 9 o'clock where you are, Daniel. I think
Yes,
we need
in
to wrap it up and
Switzerland.
have some dinner. Before we go, though, can we please go back to the beginning and very, very quickly review and go through the words and expressions? And if you haven't made a note of these, and you don't want to watch the video again, this is a good time to ask any final questions or write down any expressions that you like. So we had a slow coach, which is a person who does things very slowly and needs to do things faster. And slowpoke is the American English equivalent. Daniel?
We had you don't say. It's used either to express surprise or a lack of surprise in a humorous or slightly unkind way.
Get a move on is to do something quicker. Come on, you're going too slow. Hurry up, get a move on, do it faster.
To go the extra mile, to do more than one is required to do.
You're on the fence about something, you're not sure, you can't make a decision. What should I do? You're on the fence.
I lost my train of thought, to forget about what I was talking about.
And what happens at the end, that's what you end up doing. Remember to put the verb in the gerund. I ended up staying home and not going out.
Can I pick your brain? To talk to someone in order to get helpful information or advice.
When you have no idea about something, you could say, "Oof, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine."
Don't get me wrong, so with this idiom you want to make sure that someone does not get an incorrect idea about what you are saying or what you are about to say.
To make matters worse is quite obvious. To make a situation worse than it was before. You're making things worse.
If you will, is used to say that a particular expression is one way of saying something, especially to suggest that some people may not choose to say it that way.
If something is not as easy as it seems to be, you can say that's easier said than done. Learning a language is easier said than done. It takes time.
To nail something is to do something extremely well or successfully.
And it's time to wrap up and say goodbye. But before we do, here's the last one.
To roll with it, to adapt to a situation despite unexpected circumstances or challenges.
Okay, well, if you've been watching live, thank you very much for keeping us company and spending some time with us. And if you're watching the replay, thank you. And I will be back next week with Lynn, and hopefully Daniel will agree to come back in the future and do another live stream. This was a lot of fun. Before we go, my name's Craig from mansioningles.com, where you can study English for free. And if you don't know about our podcast, you can go to inglespodcast.com to listen, or wherever you happen to be listening to your podcasts, so to speak. And let me find your... Here we are.
So thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to be here. It was a lot of fun. And I also learned some expressions. It's really amazing.
So go to myfluentpodcast.com if you want more of Daniel, and why wouldn't you? And don't forget the Vocab Man on the same website that has lots of these useful expressions that will help you to improve your English. So
yeah,
we're up.
Sorry. Or you
Yes.
could just go to Spotify.
Yes, probably. Yeah, if you're on Spotify, that's probably a lot easier. Thanks, Norma. Thanks, Eduardo, Nathalie, Ninette. Thanks for spending time with us, and
Thank you
we'll
all.
see you again soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.